Our next speaker hails from ride-sharing service Uber, and he's here to incite a revolution. It's his belief that the hyper-specialization that we've seen in product teams of the past is just that, a thing of the past, and that the future belongs to the generalist. So please, everybody give a very warm welcome to John Garvie.
Hello, everybody. So wonderful to be here. Let's keep the energy going. How about it? I'm going to talk today about how increased specialization inside of product organizations is a thing of the past, and how we're shifting to a new dynamic where resourceful generalists will thrive. And I'll be telling this story through one of the most powerful narrative structures ever created, comic books. But more specifically, Pokemon, based on my 10-year-old son recommendation for the theme of this talk. Gotta catch them all, right? All right, here we go. All right, I'm going to argue that there are 4 powerful Poke forces at play inside of every product organization today. Human-centered cultures, powerful playbooks, evolving tools, and merging duties. And these 4 forces are creating a new kind of super-powered professional that I call resourceful generalists. I'll also tell you about how we, as insights professionals, can prepare for and adjust to these forces by acknowledging resourceful generalists, by rooting ourselves in hyperrealism, supporting them by enabling and not blocking their access to insights, which also allows us to focus on more impactful work, and how we can become resourceful generalists ourselves by doing work across the product lifecycle, thinking outside of our traditional roles, and embracing adaptability. But first, I'm going to tell you my story and how I learned the hard way about how these forces are driving big changes inside of organizations. Back in 2020, I was a research manager at Uber for about 2 months. I'd come to Uber from LinkedIn, where I was a user experience research manager, and was quickly swept up in a large round of COVID-initiated layoffs that impacted roughly 25% of the Uber population. Sadly, most of my research team was let go too. And I wasn't alone. I was one of roughly 60,000 people just in tech that were laid off that month. And that wasn't the end of layoffs. In 2020, there were around 80,000 total layoffs in tech. Okay, you're probably wondering why I'm talking about getting laid off at a conference. But the truth is that this experience caught me off guard. And I started asking some questions that helped me better understand the forces that have impacted me as a researcher, designer, and manager. I'm also a huge fan of oversharing. In fact, we just got back from a family vacation to the San Diego Zoo, and these are my kids, and they definitely think you should check out the flamingos, skip the penguins, because they smell like fish farts, according to my daughter. But back to my story. Now remember, it's 2020, in the middle of a global pandemic, and I'm definitely not freaking out. Okay, I lied. I totally was. And I was asking myself some existential questions. Why was my team impacted more than others? Were we not adding enough value? Do they think they can actually work better without us? And then 2 months after getting laid off, I kid you not, 2 months after getting laid off, I got a call from Uber asking me to come back. And as you can imagine, I had a few choice words. So yeah, I said yes. What did you think I would say? All right. And because I got the rare experience to boomerang back into a company where I was just laid off, I got a unique look into the before and after layoffs version of Uber. And the Uber that I stepped back into was a completely different company. But more on that in just a second. What I didn't realize was that my layoff was only the first spike of much larger layoffs to come. Later in 2022 and 2023, a second spike occurred. And these layoffs were much more disruptive. The spike produced a groundswell of doomsday prophecies within the insights community. Like some of the questions I posed to myself, the broader insights and UX research communities were asking tough questions and coming to terms with hard truths. Like Judd, who spoke today on one of our panels, he wrote and was asking if we are at a fundamental inflection point with how we deliver insights. Or others wondering if we're at the lowest point of UX. And still others were asking if we had entered into a new dark age of late-stage UX. And maybe the most fundamental question people were asking, is this even a viable career path in the future? And I'm here to tell you that UX research and insights professionals are still crucial. We will continue to play an important role inside of tech organizations and product organizations, but we have to evolve to stay relevant in this new post-layoffs paradigm. This is because all product organizations, and particularly those that went through layoffs, have fundamentally changed or are in the midst of changing as we speak. Just like how the Uber I walked back into had fundamentally changed as well. So, there are 4 poke forces driving much of this change. Some of these forces have been happening for some time, some are newer, but the 4 forces create a completely new kind of product environment where what I call resourceful generalists thrive. And all this creates new expectations for insights professionals. I'm going to walk you through these 4 forces and then talk about how we as insights professionals can adapt to them. Let's start with force 1, human-centered cultures. Driven by design thinking, human-centeredness has gone mainstream. Now, it can be argued about whether design thinking has lived up to the hype, but thought leaders like Don Norman, Jacob Nielsen, Tim Brown of IDEO, and countless other thought leaders have ingrained the idea that design thinking and human-centered approaches are valuable and are worth using in broader business contexts. In fact, these efforts have been so successful that every top business school now teaches design thinking. And I just pulled a bunch of the ads for those business schools here. The result, a new generation of business executives, product managers, and entrepreneurs who know about human-centered approaches. This means that human-centered culture is no longer owned just by UX. It's now owned by the entire product organization. Next up is force 2, powerful playbooks. Hard-won insight methodologies developed over a decade have now been packaged into powerful playbooks. Excellent books like Continuous Discovery Habits from experts like Teresa Torres have reached a mainstream audience of product leaders and practitioners. In fact, these playbooks have been so successful that some insights professionals have blamed the authors for research layoffs. I know Teresa, and she's one of the most talented product insights professionals I've ever worked with. I stand firmly in the camp that it's poor form to blame a book for losing your job, but it is a clear signal of the power of these playbooks and how widespread the powerful playbooks force has become. The main takeaway here is that the playbooks will only get better and more widely available. Roles outside of insights will continue to pick up these playbooks to their own benefit. Force 3, evolving tools. The pace at which new research and insights tools are coming to the market has significantly increased. These tools are getting more powerful and easier to use, allowing any user to self-service more easily and get even quicker and deeper levels of analysis and synthesis without experts. I think the announcements this morning was an indication of that as well. Plus, now AI is supercharging these tools. In addition to off-the-shelf ones we're familiar with, companies are building their own AI-powered insights tools, which can provide even more capability to any role. This means that a subset of questions that would have previously required an insights professional to answer can now be answered by anyone inside of the product organization, radically empowering novices. Force 4, merging duties. As organizations have gotten leaner, employees have absorbed some of the duties of lost roles. Until 2022, maturing organizations that wanted to grow quickly had easy access to quick loans, and investment opportunities were plentiful. In this new environment, that is no longer the case, as interest rates have gone up and VCs have become more disciplined about their investment portfolios. Additionally, as organizations have reached maturity and streamlined their business models, they've cut employees. As we know, since 2022, there have been around 500,000 layoffs just in tech. Rather than these duties of these employees going away entirely, they have been absorbed by others in the organization through heightened productivity. As I see it, market conditions will drive further consolidation, and backed by the other three forces, we will increasingly see smaller organizations achieving incredible outcomes with only a handful of employees. For example, Midjourney is said to have reached hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue with just a team of 11. In this environment, a new kind of super professional is evolving who I call resourceful generalists. Resourceful generalists are adaptable and smart professionals who are laser focused on increased productivity, are inspired to solve challenges by any means necessary, and are often undeterred to do work across roles and responsibilities. And fueled by the four forces, resourceful generalists will thrive inside of the product organizations of today and tomorrow. So I imagine that many of you will have critiques of this analysis. You might say these four forces are nothing new. To some extent, I agree with you. There have always been new tools, evolving organizations, and transfers of knowledge. What's different today is the rate and speed at which this is happening. And now, the tech industry, similar to the evolution of other mature industries like the automotive industry, is going through an intense period of change and evolution. So here's what I'd like you to consider. In the course of creating this deck, I've used 5 new AI tools. I used Midjourney for the comic expired images. And for those eagle-eyed folks out there, you may have seen the prompts throughout this deck. I used Gemini, ChatGPT, and Copilot for help with research and analysis. And I used Tome, a new AI-based deck creation tool, which gave me some inspiration for deck layout and overall narrative structure. Prior to these tools, I would have needed double the editing time and help from an illustrator and more. Now, these tools have cousins in the insights domain, and resourceful generalists are already using them. So, you may be wondering what we can do about it, how we can adapt to this new reality. And that comes down to 3 actions we can take. Acknowledging resourceful generalists by rooting ourselves in hyperrealism. Supporting them by enabling and not blocking their access to insights, which also allows us to focus on more impactful work. And becoming resourceful generalists ourselves by doing work across the product lifecycle and thinking outside of our traditional roles. Let's start with acknowledge. Ray Dalio, the founder of Bridgewater Associates, an asset management firm, says, "Be a hyper-realist. Truth, or more precisely, an accurate understanding of reality, is the essential foundation for any good outcome." The good news is that being a hyper-realist is an insight professional's purpose and superpower. We're committed to telling hard truths, rooted in data. These truths are sometimes difficult to hear, but we hold ourselves and our organizations accountable to these truths because it's the right thing to do for our teams and businesses. And this is the moment that calls us to lean into this capacity within our own community, looking boldly at the future of our profession and work, even when it's uncomfortable. Let's move on to our next action, support. Supporting resourceful generalists thoughtfully has been one of the keys to my team's success. We realize that we are in control of how we empower generalists. And this has allowed us to evolve with these broader forces while maintaining the quality that drive optimal outcomes for our teams and business. Instead of blocking their access, we built frameworks, guardrails, and programs for them. When we did this at Uber, we developed a model based on uncertainty and business risk. Uncertainty is based on how much we already know, whether we have answered any related question before. Business risk is based on how much risk we take by not answering the question at hand. As you can see, this matrix allows UXR to own high risk and high uncertainty projects, which is where we can deliver the most value. The other quadrants include outsourcing, enabling self-service, and dropping an inquiry entirely. To support this model, we developed a range of different tools and templates for our resourceful generalists. And this model extends beyond research. The UX design team that I manage follows a similar approach. The design team's decision matrix is based on OKR impact and UX complexity. And just like our teammates on UXR, this approach allows our Fairly design team, who are here in the audience, to deliver impact at scale through partnership and prioritization. In summary, supporting resourceful generalists involves proactively designing how your team wants to support them, not the other way around. Become, the last action for us to consider, becoming a resourceful generalist. Don Norman is the co-founder of the Nielsen-Norman Group. He challenges each of us to start thinking more broadly about our roles and impact, and to become generalists to drive impact and influence. He says that increased respect comes when you're able to think and do work outside of specialized departments. As insights professionals, if we wish to increase our impact and influence, we too have to become resourceful generalists. And there are two ways that we must become generalists. The first is to think and work more broadly across all stages of the product lifecycle. It's no longer an option to narrowly focus on one part or another. We must be able to accurately move across the lifecycle, adjusting our focus nimbly on where gaps in business risk and uncertainty exist. We must also think and do work more fluidly across roles and functions. We can't be constrained by our traditional areas of specialization, and we must start working across domains together. As a quick anecdote, a year ago, I decided to change my role at Uber from UX research management to UX design management. I made this change because I believe that designers are researchers and vice versa, and I wanted to lean into my potential as a generalist. But even if we don't jump roles, we must focus on adaptability. Not surprisingly, according to LinkedIn Learning, the most in-demand skill of 2024 is adaptability. As insights professionals, we must learn how to write a PRD and translate our findings into concrete design recommendations. We must also frame our insights around business value. We must ask other roles for self-service tips and tools when we get blocked. It's also helpful that AI now writes SQL for you. And finally, we must always be one step ahead in our thinking about what other resourceful generalists might need or want from our roles. So, as we wrap up, there are two things I want to leave you with. One, the four forces, powerful playbooks, human-centered cultures, evolving tools, and merging duties are already at play inside of your organization. If you don't see them yet, you might just find one around the corner the next time you look. These forces combined create resourceful generalists, and they are inside of every organization. They will become increasingly powerful. Two, to adapt to these four forces and evolve alongside resourceful generalists, we have to acknowledge, support, and become. Acknowledge what is by rooting ourselves in hyper-realism. Support resourceful generalists by enabling and not blocking access to insights. And finally, become resourceful generalists ourselves by working across the product lifecycle, not being constrained by traditional zones of specialization, and embracing adaptability. When you do this, you will become part of the generalist revolution that will shape the future of insights. Thank you so much.
We do have a few questions from our chats, from the live stream, from Mats Di Girolamo. His question is, how do you see the resourceful generalist different from a T-shaped individual who knows a lot about a lot, but does have deep focus in certain specific areas?
I love that question because I think in many ways a resourceful generalist is a T-shaped person. But what I argue is that bottom part of the T going down, the root, that grounds you, right? Your area of specialization is still an area that's really important to you as a professional, and you don't want to lose that. But the four forces, I argue, are creating the broader top part of the T, right? So as you think about continuing, I think, to evolve and change, root yourself in that specialization, but grow your limbs.
Awesome. I also have a question here from Ashley Trowbridge. So she's curious to know what roles and job postings are out there that indicate this, as they found that many are still specialist roles. Are they really resourceful generalist roles in disguise? I like this question.
That's a really good question. I'm not an expert on all of the roles that are available or are sort of like evolving or changing, but I have seen more roles that kind of match the resourceful generalist, way of being and acting. I read an article recently that indicated that particularly AI companies are looking for these kinds of folks to come into their organization because they know they're scrappy, they can solve problems, and they can actually leverage the tools that they're building.
Amazing. Well, that's all we have time for today with John. Can we give John one big round of applause, please?
Thank you so much.
Amazing work. Thank you so much.